So moving on to some questions that many of our viewers have about startups. As you know, many founders struggle to find their right co-founder and their team. Do you have any advice for these people?
Yeah, finding the right co-founder is absolutely critical to the future success of your company. You can actually broaden that. Finding the right set of people with whom to work on your startup is the ultimate determinant of whether you're going to be successful, or the most important determinant of whether you'll be successful or not. If you get great people who complement you, generally in the beginning, it's people who are pretty good friends, and they don't have to be, but you better become pretty tight, just because you spend so much time and such stressful times with them. If you're not tight and if you don't communicate well, fractures will form in your relationship that, in the end, if founders break up, it's the end of a company way more than, say, running out of money will be. Lots of companies have run out of money and survived and done really well. I think every Elon Musk company ever ran out, went way into the red before actually, becoming worth many billions of dollars. So you want to find people who are good friends, who complement you, and then people who, get things done, who can build things, who are resourceful and determined, just as we were just talking about. Um, I'll use my great source of startup wisdom, PG, once again. And when he wrote about how to start a startup and the kind of founders you should get, he said you should look for animals. And that's kind of, that almost sounds pejorative, but it's not. It's people who are going to grab onto a problem and find a solution no matter what.
Yeah, I love that. Another question that many student founders have, and a question that recently came up for me as well as I started developing my beauty startup, is what advice can you give to early stage startups who want to follow YC's motto and really make something people want? What would you say are some of the best ways that founders can really validate their ideas?
I fear I don't have anything very interesting to say there. And that doesn't mean I don't have anything to say. I just don't think it's like sometimes we give advice that's really counterintuitive. Um, you know, an example of counterintuitive advice that's not in startup advice is, when you're skiing, if you're a skier, it turns out when you're going down the mountain, you're supposed to lean forward into the mountain, where everything if you're beginning, all of your instinct says, lean back, lean away, sit back. That's exactly the wrong thing to do. And a lot of the advice we give is counterintuitive. But this advice is pretty intuitive. To build something people want, you should talk to them. You should find out what they want. You should think about problems they have or you have and try to solve them. We have a very short way, sort of pat way of saying that to our founders. And we repeat it a lot and a lot and a lot. And we say, write code and talk to users. Mm. This is, obviously directed at software companies, but it's a shorthand for saying, build something that you think might create value, and then go give it to some users and talk to them and see if it does, and see what's wrong with it. And then, iterate, do it again and again and again. This is true no matter whether you're, building widgets or not. That you want to get feedback. Prototype, it's one way of doing that is prototyping a lot. Steve Jobs was super famous for prototyping. The first prototype of the iPad was in wood. He said, I want to hold it, I want to feel it, and get some feedback. So talk to users, create value, and listen very carefully to what they tell you, verbally, physically. You can watch them doing what they're doing, or as you track what's going on and look what they do with your software, you can learn a ton about what works and what doesn't, and whether you actually have made something people want. So like I said, not that interesting, obvious though, but sometimes I guess it's worth saying the obvious and keeping it top of mind. And I will say, sometimes what happens is, even though you know it and it's obvious, you get distracted. It's really easy to get distracted when you're a founder because you have so many things going on and so many different priorities. You can forget that your first priority, above all, is to make something people want. Like, what's the secret to success? What's the secret to fundraising? What's the secret? Well, the secret to all of those things in the end is to build a good product. And a good product definitionally is something that people want.
Yeah, I agree. That was really great advice. I think a lot of founders forget when they're working because they're so passionate about what they're doing at the current moment. They forget that their basic end goal is supposed to serve their customers' needs, right?
Yeah, it's very easy to get distracted by, you know, sort of everything around the cool startup scene. You know, you
Yeah.
can become kind of a startup scene stir. You can go and see, be seen and seen, and go to conferences and think about doing this sort of event if you're a startup founder. And really, one of the great things about YC and one of the key aspects of our program is what we try to get people to do is focus on those two things: writing code and talking to users, making your product better.
Yeah, that's really great advice. And as you know, social entrepreneurship, or including a social impact aspect in your startup, seems to be a growing trend. But I noticed that oftentimes a lot of companies just include the social aspect because solely for marketing purposes. So I was wondering, from your experience, what can startups do to create a true and long-lasting social impact?
Well, I don't know if you'll like my answer here, but I think the way you create a true and long-lasting social impact is to build something that people want, to build a great product that makes the world a better place. And then the society and the community around that will be better. I think this is sort of a harsh truth about startups, is you have a sort of Damocles of death hanging over your head all the time. And you need to do everything you can to avoid that coming down. You need to survive, and survival is way more important than anything else. I do think that as your company builds and you grow, you should think about this, and having a positive social impact, being a force for good in the world, is massively important. And when you build your startup, you think, I hope you're not starting a startup that is if it's successful, will be a force for bad in the world. Who wants that? So you should think about that. When my startup scales and my product is in the hands of thousands or tens of thousands, or hundreds of thousands or millions of people, it will itself be a force for good in the world. But then you can think beyond that and think about your social responsibility when you have the time and space and room to do that. But as a brand new startup, focus on making something people want.
Yeah, I agree. What would you say is the best piece of advice you can give for students interested in founding their own startup?
Maybe we've given a lot of this already, but in the sense that think about who your co-founders are. If you want to start a company, and let's say it's a software company and you're not a software engineer, find stock software engineers. Like hang out with people who can build things, and find out who you're compatible with, and find the best ones and start hanging out with them. Build stuff. If you can build, or if you can get to build stuff, get ideas, sit down with people and talk about ideas, brainstorm. So think about, if you really are if you're going to look, a lot of times you use your time in college to have a good time and to learn. If you want to be intentional about starting a startup afterwards while you're in college, think about the people you want to be part of your founding team, because most of those people will be in your network, and your closest network right now is the people you're getting to know in college. And you should get to know who's really the most excellent there. Think about them from that perspective. It sounds a little cold and harsh way to analyze the people that you're also meeting, but if you're going to be a leader and a startup founder, you want to pick and choose very carefully the people who are going to be with you. The last thing I'll say is just pay attention. The world is changing so much right now. There's so much disruption. This awful, terrible pandemic, which is causing such hardship and pain and loss, is also going to create so much change, which will create so much opportunity. So pay attention to what's going on, and think about it in terms of problems you want to solve. Think about that. Think about problems you've run into, problems you've heard of, and be intentional about that.
Absolutely. So now we have a small surprise for you. I'll be passing it on to Kyle for a rapid round of questions.
Hi, Jeff.
Hi, Kyle.
How's it going?
I'm doing great. How are you?
Wonderful. Thank you for being here. You guys have covered some interesting ground so far. I'm going to do a little segment, and you are lucky to be the first interviewee to experience this segment. It's called Digging Deeper with Kyle. We are going to do bonus questions, and each question you will have 30 seconds to answer. So it's kind of a rapid fire. Before I dive into these questions, there's something that I selfishly, personally wanted to ask you. Because me and many other students I know are kind of thinking about this right now. What I wanted to ask is, given that semester classes next semester are online, do you have any advice for students considering taking a gap semester to get personal work experience?
Yeah. I guess in many ways it could be just an awesome opportunity to make yourself more employable, to learn things, to discover what's going on in the world in ways that you might not have otherwise, to try out ideas, to I don't know, work on something absolutely different that you would never have worked on before. Do something different. I was just saying to Gina that the world is changing so much. So pay attention to what's going on and use this gap to do that, to teach yourself a skill that you might not already have. Learn how to code if you don't know how to code, or take a new technology that's really cool and learn about it, like CRISPR, which is this incredible gene editing technology that has the potential to be as impactful as almost any technology invented over the last several decades.
Great answer. I think that you touched on a lot of good stuff, and I have a lot to think about. Okay, we're going to jump in the bonus questions, and we're going to dig a little deeper. Does that sound good?
Okay.
Okay. All right. First question. I'm going to start the timer. 30
It's
seconds.
good to be the first person to suffer through this.
What, if anything, would you have done differently?
Sorry.
Yeah. Thank you for being the first. The first question is, what, if anything, you have done differently in your 20s or 30s?
For me, that's a long time ago now, but I'll try. I'll try to still answer. The first thing, I really wish I'd had someone to talk to in my 20s who knew something about entrepreneurship, because I always wanted to be an entrepreneur, but I went and worked for the man. And I had so much idealism, energy, so little need for anything when I was in my 20s. I should have started a company right out of college. And, every Friday night we would go drinking at PJ Mulligan's, which was a bar in Cupertino, California, and talk about the great startups we were starting. But I had no idea, no way, no clue how to even get started. And it just wasn't so obvious then. And there's so much knowledge now, and there's so many great people you can turn to ask, or you can go to our website, go to startupstool.org/library, and there's an incredible library of content about how to start a startup. You can read PG's essays about how to start a startup. And there's such, I wish in my 20s that I'd had some of that. I didn't start a startup until I was in my 30s, which is a whole different story, but maybe that's enough pain for my 20s. The pain I went through in my 30s was way different, but maybe I won't talk. I'll talk about that another time.
With one decade at a time. Yeah. Okay. On the second one, 10 years from now, what do you think that you'll regret doing too much of or too little of at this point in your life right now?
There's an old saying that that nobody on their deathbed has ever said, "Oh, I really wish I had worked more."
Yeah.
So I think if there's anything I'll regret is not finding enough balance in my life, because everything tends to be so intense about things. But I actually think r- right now, um, I'm living a pretty, I guess it's a little hard for me to say for sure. I'm pretty happy with the way things are going right now, and but I will say that once you have children, you can be pretty sure that at some point they're going to explain to you everything you should have been doing. And so for their benefit, I regret not doing what you're going to tell me I should have been doing, but didn't know I should have been doing all along.
Mm, okay.
For
Kind
what
of a
it's
catch-22. Yeah. Gotcha. Third one, getting a little deep here. What worries you most about our collective future?
It's hard not to be a little depressing when I talk about that. I actually think that, there's a lot that's been written recently about existential threats to the human race, and I take them very seriously. I think that the potential for an accidental nuclear war, much less an intentional one, is way higher than people understand. And so my biggest worry is that we don't make it out of this century as a species. And a lot of other people are worried about things like artificial intelligence. So there's a whole set of worries I have. I'm also worried that all this amazing technology we're building, all of it's a double-edged sword. All of it has dual use. And it's very possible to build a dystopian future with some of the amazing, great technology we built. Look at Facebook, right? Facebook, and Zuck, he had a noble goal to, besides make a lot of money, which maybe is, you can consider that noble or not, but was to actually connect people in profound ways. And yet there was a dark side to that in the way people connected, which has had some really negative outcomes. And so, and facial recognition technology, super awesome on your phone, right? Except that a dictatorial state can use that to control the population. Super worried about things like that. And lastly, I'm really worried about another, I would say, technology related problem, which is income inequality. Income inequality will be a major problem henceforth in the world. A lot of that driven by technology. And unless we figure out a way to resolve that, to create a world where there's an equality of opportunity and where there's, some reasonable distribution of resources so that people don't live miserable lives. Like so we can take people out of misery and give them opportunity and give them good lives, then I think then I worry a lot about our future. And, a lot of this is on your guys' heads to help us figure out, because, my generation right now is not doing all that great a job on any of those scores.
Yeah.
Good luck.
Thank you. The burden's on my shoulders. There is I won't ruminate on this too long, but there's a great podcast that Sam Harris did with Fred Kaplan about nuclear bombs and kind of the idea that we have not talked about this recently, and it's in the back of everyone's minds, but it is still very much something we should be concerned about. I'll move on from that. Yeah, I'll move on from that. We have two final questions. We'll do these ones quickly. If you could have dinner with one person in history, who would it be?
That's like an impossible question. There's been a lot of people.
One. And you can give them a benefit of a modern education if necessary. So like Einstein, for example. Yeah.
I think a lot. I think actually a lot about this, and I always go back and forth. One person I just would love to have met and talked to is Richard Feynman, because he was not only one of the most brilliant men ever, but brilliant humans ever, pardon me, but he was really fun. He was like, he played the bongos, and he was really an interesting guy. Can I have more than one, or do I only get one?
You should get one, but I'll give you it this time.
I want two more, actually. I want one. I'm going to have two writers, one more dead person and one more live person. I'd like to talk to William Shakespeare, because, and I pick English-speaking people because I don't want to go through having to like it'd be cool to talk to Leonardo da Vinci, but I don't speak Italian, so that wouldn't have been a very good dinner. Like we would have just nodded at each other. But Shakespeare, he understood humans and the human condition better than anyone. And I don't know. I'd like to hear what was in the man's head. And
Yeah.
God, I felt like, okay, that's too bad. I should have picked an incredible woman I would have liked to talk to, like Marie Antoinette too, as well. And I'm mostly familiar with frankly, you know, dead Europeans, so that's not so great. But I'll have to work on that answer.
Well, either way, some fascinating responses. I think Shakespeare.
By the way, another really interesting person on the other side of the world, if you could speak to him, would be Genghis Khan. Because we all have some of his DNA. He'd be an interesting person to talk to. Someone like him or Alexander the Great. I mean, there's so many. There's like, it's an impossible question. I can't even start. But.
Yeah, my brother said Genghis Khan, so it's funny you said that.
Oh, that's funny. Yeah.
Interesting one. Yeah. Okay. Lastly, if we are ever in a position to recreate the T-Rex, should we do it?
Are you kidding? Of course. Yes. And the velociraptors too. You have to have them together though, because the velociraptors will fight the T-Rex and protect us. I'm pretty sure I saw that in a movie. Of course, we've got to do that. Yes.
Okay, good. Yeah, I wanted to make sure we were on the same boat. Okay.
Oh my gosh, yes.
Thank you so much for answering the bonus questions. This was Digging Deeper. I will pass it back to Gina now to finish the interview off.
Thanks, Kyle.
Thanks, Jeff.
Oh my gosh, I loved your answer so much. Great. So the last question we ask all of our guests is, what book should every college student read?
Wow, this is another amazingly hard question. So I'm not going to try to be too deep and give you like a book you have to read. I'm just going to talk about a book that I just think about a lot. It's nowhere near one of like the great works of anything. It's just a super cool book about a super cool story about an amazing couple of men, and I just love the story so much. It's The Undoing Project by Michael Lewis, which is a story about it's kind of a follow-up to his book Moneyball, and it's about Danny Kahneman and Amos Tversky, these amazing psychologists and Danny Kahneman won the Nobel Prize for economics because of what he did, learning about how human beings are human beings, and it's such a cool story. And so I don't know if it's a book every college student should read, but you will enjoy reading it. So go read it.
Yeah, that sounds super interesting. I will definitely check it out. So that marks the end of our interview. I want to say thank you so much for joining us again. And if there's anything else you would like to share or maybe promote, this is the time.
Well, the Y Combinator application for the Winter 21 batch is wide open. It's open until I think September 23rd. So if you are listening to this and are interested in doing a startup, fill out a YC application. It's actually a really good thing to do for your startup. It'll help organize your thoughts, and why not apply? It's free.
Absolutely. So thank you so much again. And Kyle, if you want to join for the end.
I'm back.
Great. So thank you so much, Jeff. And we look forward to hearing from you soon.
Thank you, guys. Appreciate it. Have a great night.
Thanks, Jeff. Take care.
Bye.